Most people never think about how they can get out of bed, how they get out of bed in the morning. For some families, that simple task requires a ceiling-mounted Hoyer lift, a careful planning, and an entire support system. Today, we're going inside one family's journey with an ultra rare genetic condition, DYT-PRKRA, and exploring the technology, caregiving, and advocacy um, that make independence possible. Welcome to Rare Connection. I'm your host, Joanna. Geneva, why did you choose a ceiling lift instead of only using a traditional Hoyer lift?
So, so one of the problems with most state and Medicaid programs, I don't know much about Medicare. I would assume that Medicare might pay for this kind of equipment, but I don't know. But Medicaid does, is that Medicaid wants to pay for a Hoyer lift because Hoyer lifts are a lot less expensive. They've come up
Mm-hmm.
in price. We had to purchase a new one because we had moved our original lift up to my parents' summer house in Vermont so that Robert could go up there for, a week at a time, and we had a way to lift him. And then we had our motor on our overhead ceiling track lift went kaput, and it was going to be, days before we could get someone in to fix it. So we emergency purchased out of our own money a Hoyer lift, and I think this time it cost so God, I think it was like maybe it was like $1,000. I'm not sure. Maybe it wasn't that much money. Seemed like a lot at the time because we were paying out of pocket. Um, and had to go back to using that for a while. But generally, because a Hoyer lift, I mean, there are ones that are motorized now, so you don't have to do this like pneumatic pumping thing. Like there's a little bit of, you can plug them in and there's a little motorized feature that will raise someone in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but those cost several $1,000s. The overhead ceiling track lifts, the motor plus the track, it depends on how long the piece of track is, how many pieces of track you want. The motor itself can cost like $5,000. And then there's installing the track. And so what I recall is that the total cost of the lift and the two pieces of track that we initially installed came to somewhere between $8,000 and $9,000. And to the best of my knowledge, Medicaid still will not routinely pay for an overhead track lift. I mean, it can depend on what state you're in because Medicaid is a state federal program. But I know that in Maryland, it's something that Maryland Medicaid does not routinely pay for, and it's really difficult to get an exception for one.
Mm-hmm.
We only got the state grant program to let us take some of the state grant money to pay for the track lift because we were having such difficulty using the Hoyer lift, and we were sometimes alone. One of us was alone with Robert. That my husband, in particular, had taken to because he was stronger than I was, simply lifting Robert from his wheelchair to his sleep safe bed, which is the bed that sits up kind of high off the floor. And because Robert was getting heavier, my husband was trying to do some of his personal care and change him, and just wasn't able to get Robert over enough towards the center of the bed. And at that point in time, Robert could still kick his legs up in the air and roll slightly. My husband turned around to dispose of some material. And Robert, at that point in time, thought it was funny to kick his legs up in the air and roll. And he rolled off the bed and he smashed into the floor. And he broke his thigh and he broke his occipital bones, his eyes, and he broke his nose. So at that point, we were aware that the ceiling track lifts existed. And we used Robert's case manager for the state grant money to make the case that it would be safer for Robert and everybody else if we had an overhead ceiling track lift.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to put together documentation from Robert's physicians, and the fact that a terrible accident had already happened, was taken into account, and they approved the use of the funds.
Hmm. Um, yeah. Has it changed your daily routine? Has it changed your daily routine?
Oh yeah, I mean it's just much easier to get Robert in and out of bed, and it's much easier for us now that he's an adult and he's in some of Medicaid's waiver programs for home-based services to attract staff
Mm-hmm.
because you know, Robert weighs something like 150, 160 pounds, and nobody can just lift him out of his wheelchair and lift him
Yeah.
onto the bed. And it's not safe to use a Hoyer lift by yourself. And furthermore, staff have varying levels of experience with
Mm-hmm.
safely operating a Hoyer lift. So it's been a big benefit for us in terms of attracting nursing staff, and the other types of staff that work with Rob because they don't have to strain their backs
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have to be responsible for operating something that has inherent safety risks.
Mm-hmm. So you answered the question about safety already. Does it reduce caregiver injuries?
Oh, absolutely. No question. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, as I've grown older and we had to use that Hoyer lift for a while as a backup because the battery in the machine broke. It needed to be replaced. I mean, this given Robert's weight, for me, just like, the wheels on the Hoyer lift are not exactly like, race car wheels or anything. I mean,
Yeah.
they're stubborn and the things don't turn very well. And it was a strain on my back just to like, maneuver that lift into place into the right position. It was a strain on my shoulders and everything else. I mean, I was taking a lot of ibuprofen. Um, when I was younger, it was easier, but but yeah, I mean, is it less strain than lifting Robert in a deadlift? Yeah, absolutely. But still,
So
you know,
is your Hoyer is the Hoyer lift that you have is it a automatic or is it crank?
the Hoyer lift that we bought was a crank action one
Mm,
because that was what we could afford out of pocket short notice because Medicaid would have paid for another one, but that would have been a process that would have taken us 30 days. And basically we didn't have a way to lift Robert. So, we just contacted a home equipment service that had one available and could bring one out to the house that day. And we paid cash for it.
mhm. Are there transfers you can do now that would have been difficult before?
Um, with the track lift or
Yes.
yeah, any transfer for Robert is difficult. So yeah, I mean, he cannot support his own weight at all. He cannot assist with transfer in any way. He cannot stand. So every lift is, as we say metaphorically, a big lift,
Hmm.
right?
How long did the installation process take?
That is hard for me to remember. I mean, it took some time to we had to submit 3 bids to different companies because those are the rules, for using the funds. And we found a vendor, probably took a few weeks to schedule a vendor. I can't remember if they came out to do an initial assessment and then did the installation at a later date or not. But it was a process. It took a few weeks once we got approval to use the funds.
Hmm.
But installing the track, I mean, he did that within a few hours once he had assessed the ceiling in our attic and everything.
Hmm.
The ceiling in the room and then the attic floor above that. um, to figure out how to safely post all there are a whole bunch of different metal clamps that support the track,
Hmm.
and those have to be anchored properly because of course you don't want the whole thing to come crashing down.
So you said that insurance didn't cover it.
Nope.
Um, were there any unexpected challenges?
No, the only unexpected challenge has come recently. So Robert has a bed called a sleep safe bed. It's not a hospital bed. You can look them up online. Hospital beds were deemed to be a little bit too dangerous for him at a certain point in his life because he could wriggle around a little bit on his back. And with the way a hospital bed is designed, there are gaps in the rails and people can actually asphyxiate if they aren't being monitored 24/7. So the sleep safe bed is designed to look like a regular home bed and it has these big wooden panels that can be locked into place or dropped down for care on either side. And as Robert has grown larger, we initially thought when we installed the track lift like 15 years ago that the bed was okay over in the corner because we could still reposition Robert. So we didn't necessarily need to drop down the other rail on the opposite side of the bed. But as he's gotten heavier and we're more concerned when he's sleeping about reducing pressure on his lungs or um, pressure points on various parts of his body, we need to have access to both sides of the bed with the rail now. And so we recently had to really think through the dynamics of rearranging Robert's bed in his room with a track lift where it was, because there's no way to actually redo that without a lot of money being incurred. But but it took us a few days, but we figured it out.
Hmm.
Now we have access to both sides of his bed. There's still room to pull his wheelchair up alongside, and we're all happier. So, like I said, you can get one of these things installed when your child is kind of a teenager, and then later on their needs might change, and you might be like, "Oh my God, I need to change the bed around." So, um, it, 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 there are always going to be challenges with families for all of this. I mean, the Hoyer lift doesn't work well in small spaces. Um, the the track lift, is more flexible, but families might want to even think ahead like we didn't. Well, maybe one day we might want access to both sides of the bed. So think about positioning the bed so it's not just with one side against the wall. Um, it's rough.
Hmm.
Nothing you do is perfect.
Hmm. Um, you said you still use the Hoyer lift.
No, it's currently stored in the basement. It's just our backup.
Oh, um, so there's several different types of lifts, and so there's a ceiling lift, but there's also automatic and crank, and then I've also seen sit to stand lifts. When would you choose one over the other?
I'm not familiar with a stand lift.
So I've used one of those in a home care setting.
Mhm,
Used to be I'm a caregiver
mhm.
and for DHS, and they actually have. I was working with somebody with MS who was able to. She used a wheelchair, but she would have it so that she could. Um, it would pull her up, and so
Okay.
that she was in a standing position,
Hmm.
which was great for like things like toileting and for bathing and that type of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but you have to have use of your legs at that time, at that point in time. And
Right.
eventually, with MS, they will lose their ability to walk or stand.
Yeah,
It
really have a.
does it does help maintain that for as long as you can, but because you are using it, if you don't use it, you do lose it,
Mhm,
but even faster.
mhm.
But it does that one does require use of your legs.
Right. So in our case, by the time, Robert had gotten large enough where we really couldn't easily lift him anymore, he no longer had the use of his legs or his arms to support him to help stand. So, it was Hoyer lift or ceiling track lift. So yes, we're still using the ceiling track lift. I mean, that's all there and installed. But the Hoyer lift is just our backup in case, I don't know, the power goes out or, you know, I mean,
Hmm.
the motorized lift does have a rechargeable battery. So if the power goes out in your home, you know, the battery will keep working so you can use the lift. But like I said, the motor can break down too, which we experienced. So it's good to have a backup. So the Hoyer lift itself is simply stored in our basement so that if we ever need it, it's there.
Hmm.
We can bring it upstairs. Um, but yeah, we just solely use the ceiling track lift right now.
Hmm. So do you have, I mean, so how did you decide when you were getting the Hoyer lift whether you wanted a crank or automatic? Or did they have automatic at the time? Did you know about them?
At the time that we got that first Hoyer lift, that the state paid for,
Hmm.
I it was more an issue of our case manager letting us know that this was a Hoyer lift and this was the model and the vendor that the state would use and that they would definitely pay for it if we just asked.
Hmm.
So we really didn't research any other kinds of Hoyer lifts. So I don't know when they started making or using Hoyer lifts that you could plug into an outlet that would, provide some electrical support for the lifting.
Hmm.
And then, like I said, when we realized we had transferred our existing Hoyer lift to my parents' house in Vermont, so Robert could experience vacations up there, and we could lift him. And we had to buy a new one. It was during a crisis moment, so we went with what we felt we could afford.
Hmm.
I think my husband actually asked what it would cost to buy a Hoyer lift, retail that had a motor lift in it, and it was like $3,000 or $4,000. And so we were like, okay, no, we'll go with the $1,000 model. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so, you know, yeah, I was going to ask you what goes into deciding that, but um,
I think it's also helpful. It depends on whether you're dealing with, a child, a young adult, an elderly parent. Um, it's always obviously wise to discuss the options with your doctor. Sometimes your primary care doctor doesn't really understand these things. And if you have access to a physiatrist, that's your go-to for talking through all of these options. Because
or even a
that's
physical therapist. But
even a physical therapist, yes. Sorry, that's another option that's more common for people.
yeah.
Children and young adults who have really complex physical disabilities often end up getting referred to a physiatrist because they're trained to evaluate habilitation needs and also know all of the ins and outs of the different kinds of equipment and can set you up to, you know,
Yeah.
figure out what's your best option. But yeah, definitely physical therapist. Don't have access to a
Yeah.
physiatrist, go with a physical therapist.
Yeah. I had just had my first physiatry appointment. I'm like, how the, why the heck didn't they do this before? But
Yeah,
I had never heard of one before.
yeah. Yeah, we were introduced to them pretty early, just because at a certain point when Robert started needing more complex wheelchairs, we needed to be directed to not just to a physical therapy clinic, but to have guidance from a physiatrist to help assist the physical therapist with making certain determinations about different supports that he needed.
Mm.
Um, and they also helped with other sorts of referrals for equipment and other needs. So,
So, why did you end up seeing the physiatrist?
um, Robert started seeing a physiatrist. Gosh, I mean, probably it was when he started seeing a neurologist at a children's hospital.
Hmm.
And so at that point, neurology is looking at all of these different needs that you might have, and they see that you have a lot of need for equipment and that you have significant need for evaluation. And especially if you're receiving your neurology services at a teaching hospital that has a lot of different clinics, that's what they'll do. They'll say, "Hey, go to physiatry clinic, you know,
Hmm.
uh, let us give you a referral there," and then you establish a relationship with a particular physiatrist. I Children's medicine is something different than the medical care that you get when you're aging or when you're older and you're sort of, backing into it from a different point in your life. There's a lot
Hmm.
more support for the pediatric community when people have complex disabilities and medical needs because they're growing children and you're in a pediatric environment, and often you're already, because of your complex needs, in a clinic setting at a teaching hospital or a research institution. And
Hmm.
so you find that you're sort of fast tracked the specialists you need more efficiently
Hmm.
than if you are an older adult or a senior citizen looking at needing supports for the first time.
Yeah. So when I went, it was for a nerve conduction study, and so it's like, eh, um, I was looking at the physiatry. What do they do? I never heard of them, and it's
They're a cool service. I mean,
yeah.
we had difficulty. We had a break in services. Um, People listening to this who have children who are approaching the age of 21 will empathize because you age out of pediatric services.
Hmm.
And so you have to start choosing adult providers. And my son's transition, we started a little bit before the pandemic, but then the pandemic hit. And so we were reluctant to start just going to, certain new clinics. We wanted to minimize our contact with the medical world and hospitals and things for a little while. So it took us a while to get connected with a physiatrist that served both children and young adults. And once we did that, the physiatrist was able to connect us with a dental clinic that would meet my son's needs, you know, with the appropriate seating clinics and occupational supports and other things that we needed. Assistive tech clinic. I mean, there's so many things that they do. It's just amazing. It may even be an underutilized specialty.
It's definitely underutilized because most people haven't even heard of them. So
Mhm.
it's what are the
They're
big?
awesome.
Yeah, I had to ask my I even asked my nurse. She had never heard of them either. So it's because I'm on a clinical trial because of a rare genetic condition I have, but it's I have homocystinuria, which is a
Mhm.
metabolic condition.
Right.
Um, but let's see,
Yeah.
what are
The
the biggest?
physician- I'm sorry.
Let's see, what are the biggest advantages of ceiling lifts?
Uh, it's just the pure lack of physical effort on your part, the caregiver's part. I mean, it just period just relieves all kind of strain. I mean, there's that motorized lifting part, but then like I said, the tracks are actually designed so that you can. I mean, I can just gently tap my son, and the track is designed so that he just rolls smoothly over from the wheelchair surface to the bed surface
Mhm.
without any energy on my part. It's like nothing at all. I'm hardly pushing him or moving him. I'm just putting my hand on him, and the track is designed with its whatever its ball and whatever. I'm not sure. I'm not a mechanical person, but
Yeah.
those like ball joints or whatever, and you just literally they just slide.
Hmm.
Like,
when would someone choose one over the other?
well, I think it's possible. Say if you live in an apartment
Hmm.
and there's there's the building won't let you install something on the ceiling of that type. That there's no way to safely assess whether it can be installed. Might depend on the terms of your lease. If you're an apartment or even leasing a house, what will the landlord let you do? Um, could depend on the amount of money that you have available. If insurance won't cover it or Medicaid won't cover it or you can't raise funds for it, then you want to look into a cheaper alternative. I mean, a good bet would be to say, get a Hoyer lift that has um, an electrical component for the lift. You can plug it in, and there's a motor in it that will lift, rather than you having to use a use a crank
Yeah.
handle or something. Um, Although Hoyer lifts do take up a lot of space, you have to have someone some place to put them when they're not in use.
Hmm.
They have a big footprint. And in some rooms, it can be difficult to figure out how to maneuver the wheelchair out from between the legs of the Hoyer lift and where to put it, and whether you actually have enough room, enough clearance to swing the legs of the Hoyer lift underneath a bed or another surface. So it's an issue of looking at your living space.
Hmm. Yeah. So many people do assume that you have to own your home. It's not necessarily always true, but
Right.
you can, I would think with the ADA would be all over this if you
Mhm.
did, if they did raise a problem with it.
I would hope so. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would hope so. I just don't know because I haven't encountered that problem because we've been fortunate enough to own our home all this time. So as homeowners,
Yeah.
we can make our own decisions.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure how the ADA would approach that. You might want to contact your state or county's Aging and Disability Services or your state's Civil Rights Commission, if you get pushback from housing or the landlord
Hmm. Or maybe even the housing authority.
or the housing authority. Yeah.
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 Um, how much care does Rob require?
Robert Carr is 24/7 hands-on care. Um, I mean, there's nurse monitoring that needs to be done because he has a tracheostomy and a J tube and everything. There are medications that need to be given. There's a lot of personal care that needs to be done. I won't go into it for privacy reasons for him, but I think, we all understand what that means. Bathing can be difficult.
Before we continue, I'd like to introduce you to Rob Stone. Rob lives with an ultra rare condition called DYT-PRKRA and is unable to speak verbally. Instead, he communicates using an eye gaze device, which tracks the movement of his eyes as he selects words on the screen. The computer uh, then speaks those words aloud. The speech you are about to hear was written by Rob and delivered using his eye gaze communication device.
I'm an artist and advocate for healthcare and disability rights. I live in Maryland with my family. I am 28 years old, and I am fighting for me and other disabled children and adults to live with dignity in our communities. Medicaid home and community-based services are my lifeline, but congressional Republicans have slashed Medicaid funding. I want to live a fulfilling, independent life in my community. I should be able to control my own life, just like anyone else. I'm a grown-ass man and should not have to rely on charity or have to live in a facility. Republicans said they wouldn't hurt the most vulnerable people on Medicaid. Well, they lied. And they need to fix this.
Um, but then he needs constant help, like using his communication devices. The school system never taught him to read or write. So while he does have an eye gaze communicator, he can basically say what we've programmed into it for him to say. it's still hard for him to put together his own sentences. We have to, in order to put together his testimony and his speeches, we have to orally go over it with him sentence by sentence. And he can answer yes and no questions by moving one hand for yes and one hand for no. And we can use his facial expressions. And if we get a negative response, like, no, I don't want to say that, then we ask a bunch of questions to try to figure out, well, why? Or how do you want us to modify this? Or what words do you want us to use? And then we can program those things in. So he needs a high level of support with communication because he's non-speaking.
Mhm.
And even his on-the-go grip switches that connect to voice output devices that can mount in his wheelchair, which are just programmed to say yes and no. Those can slip out of his hands, so he's got to have someone with him all the time to help him do things. And he can't even turn on the TV by himself or switch the channel. So,
Mm.
and
So
he's not
you,
able to use a motorized wheelchair on his own because he doesn't have the motor capacity to do it. And while you can use one with an eye gaze device, he does not yet have the skill to do that. So,
hmm. um, so we're now on the eye gaze. So it's, how did he first learn to use it?
well, we first learned about it through a work colleague of my husband. We had no idea that these existed. So this is around 2006. The these the use of the eyes as a mouse to activate different kinds of computer systems by use of a camera that interfaces with the electronic device was actually developed. It was technology that was developed by the Air Force because so many fighter pilots and other pilots that need to travel at, like, supersonic speeds can actually be pinioned back in their seats by G forces so that they can't use their hands to activate controls, but they can still use their eyes. So it was actually pioneered and developed by the military. And then the first disabled people to start using it as an application were patients who had ALS, because ALS tends to develop when you are older. So you've already learned to read and write, you're literate, you know how to use a computer already. And so it became very common among that population. And there are all kinds of different technical barriers with the early development of the eye gaze. Initially, in order for the camera to know where your eyes were looking, someone had to calibrate every time they wanted to use it, meaning they had to let their eyes follow a dot around the screen to the different corners. So the cameras could really figure out where you were looking. And if you broke eye contact with the screen for even a second, like just turned your head to the side, then you had to go back and recalibrate it all over again. So
Wow.
it wasn't a technology that was really very useful for children who are, very easily distracted by
Yeah.
just about anything, right? It required a great deal of concentration and effort, and it still does. So there was a company in Virginia that maybe had some military roots, I'm not sure, and was hooked into the ALS community. They were called LC Technologies, and a friend of ours heard about them and thought that Robert should take a trial on it. So we drove out there and he tested it out and he did really well. And they recommended that we approach the school system about it. At that point in time, Medicaid did not cover those. They were terrifically expensive. They cost $17,000 and they came in multiple components, not in the, compact versions that we see today where everything's integrated. So you basically had to use them like at a desktop, or an overbed table.
Hmm.
They weren't really portable. So we started approaching the school system about that. And of course, this the school system was like, no.
So now, how old was Rob when he first learned how to use it?
So that was about, I think, 2008. So eight, one, two, three. So about 11. And his use of it was like he could hit the targets, he could activate them. Um, but because he had to be pulled up to use it, calibrated every time, he would get bored with that. So we were able to pull together some financing to buy these on our own. And my husband at one point was able to, he owned his own business. Um, and I think it was Kaiser Permanente wanted my
Mm,
husband's business. He said, okay, well, if you'll pay for, my son's eye gaze device, maybe we'll talk. So,
yeah.
we went through all the appropriate documentation channels and they were like, okay, fine, we'll pay for it. There was a $2,000 copay and, we managed that. So we've gone through a lot of different iterations of these, and the cameras and the eye tracking and the software are just moving by leaps and bounds. Like every 3 to 5 years, there are huge advances with this. And
Wow.
initially, these were just for PC users, and our family became Apple users a long time ago because the whole like integrated system works for us on a
Hmm.
personal level, um, the closed system. But now Apple is starting to get into the game. So
Yeah, I was going to say Apple is huge into the eye technology, and so I can see
yeah,
them doing this.
hasn't quite caught up with some of the PC tablet people. Now there are
Yeah,
multiple vendors that offer different types of IES devices, but our family still has trouble because you have to make a variety of different compromises every single time you look into getting a new one. And now Medicaid pays for them, but they like to see you use them for 5 years. But unfortunately, the technology changes like every 3 years. So, I don't know. And my son also has one of his eyes has a strabismus, meaning it wanders, which
hmm,
makes it more difficult for the camera to accurately assess where he's looking and that kind of thing. So for a little while, Medicaid didn't pay for them, and all of the manufacturers like basically offered them like you could buy the PC tablet for whatever that cost, $700-800, and then they would offer like these frames with cameras on them that you could buy yourself for like $3,000. I mean, it's not cheap, but we were able to manage it. And then as soon as Medicaid started paying for them, it's like they all raised their prices to like $14,000.
wow.
Yeah, I know.
Has he
Um,
tried any kind of vision therapy?
yeah, we do have regular appointments with a neuro-ophthalmologist
Hmm.
who's been able to help us with some things. But Robert's had a bunch of medical problems over the last year, and when your child is seeing so many different specialists, you end up and they're having medical problems. You have to prioritize the specialties where
Yeah,
the direct problems are. So we got to get caught up again with a neuro-ophthalmologist.
yeah. I actually, with my medical condition, I was born with two dislocated lenses, or they
Mhm.
dislocated actually at age 3, which is how I was actually diagnosed.
Mhm.
And because it looks so much like Marfan syndrome,
Mhm.
but except the lenses dislocate just the opposite.
Mhm.
So it's commonly misdiagnosed as Marfan syndrome. And when um, I was told only this is after I had the surgery to remove my right lens. They said, don't use your left eye.
Okay.
They wanted me to become only using that. They wanted me only to use the right eye because if I used both eyes together, it
Mhm.
would cause double vision.
Mhm.
And so um, I got to the point where I was testing that, like, because I test pretty much everything. Because
Mhm.
when you have something rare and that nobody else has, you tend to test things
Mhm.
because you don't believe what any doctor says because
Mhm.
nobody takes the time to look it up.
Yep.
And
Yeah, I know.
and so I was able to use both eyes together, but they were right. It does cause double vision.
Mhm.
And so I had to quit using it and give up the program, but
Well,
you can get that back.
let me tell you one thing. Almost every eye gaze system that's been developed for communication use within the last 5 or 6 years has a setting that allows you to use one eye or the other eye or both.
Oh, wow.
And the cameras are now getting so sophisticated. Initially that was like if you couldn't use both eyes together, picking one eye could be kind of hard. There are downsides to that as well. But the cameras are getting to be so good that I've actually started looking at some manufacturers right now where the camera is developed to just track one eye anyway.
Yeah.
And it does it as well as if you could use both eyes.
Yeah. Now my left eye's taken over, and so because when with this condition, if one eye fails, the other one takes over, and so the eye that I'm not used to using and haven't used all my life is the one I now have to use.
Yeah. Okay. So so I don't know where everything cut out, but with all of the contemporary iterations of these eye gaze systems through the multiple vendors that offer them now, they're typically within the settings. You can use both eyes. You can use one eye, you can use the other eye, but you can also go into the settings at any time and just change that. So that would be helpful for someone like you if you've been using your right eye.
Yeah.
You can just switch to using your left eye.
Hmm.
And yeah, you might need to recalibrate the machine and everything like that, but it's really easily done.
Yeah. Fortunately, I'm verbal and I can actually,
This is
but
also true, right?
yeah,
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 and there are a lot of other exciting developments with this because some people who are non-speaking, I mean, yeah, they can use their eyes to activate it, but it can be really fatiguing to do that.
oh yeah,
It's really hard work. So you can attach secondary switches to these devices as well, like a press switch or a grip switch to activate the cells as maybe the program scans them for you. And there's this company, I think they're called Neuronode, and they develop these little neurosensors that they can put on certain muscles that you have that you can activate or twitch reliably, and you can just make this tiny little movement to like activate the cell.
hmm,
So there are tons of exciting tech advances in this area.
yeah. I was just fascinated with this when I saw it. I'm like,
Mhm,
wow, this is a total game changer for somebody who can't speak.
mhm. Yeah, so it's been a long road because like I said, I mean, Robert, we found out about the technology very early. I mean, 2006. I mean, my gosh, that's like 20 years ago, right?
Yeah,
And
that was
so,
around the time of my that was the last time around the time of my last stroke.
oh my gosh. Yeah, so Robert and our family just keep surfing these waves of technology and you know, using certain systems and then discovering there are better systems that Robert could use more easily, and then trying to, use all of our advocacy powers and everything we've learned about working with Medicaid, in physicians' offices to develop the right kinds of letters of medical necessity and the right kinds of rationales to get the powers that be to okay, the latest device. Sometimes I would like to say we're probably successful 75% of the time.
Hmm.
25% of the time, yeah, it's no, but we've gotten pretty good at it. So
Was there a learning curve?
for Robert to use
Yeah,
the device, oh yeah, big learning curve. And it was technology dependent because, like I said, the early iterations, someone says, "Hi, Robert." Robert looks to the side. You have to go back and
yeah,
calibrate. Robert's like a 10-year-old. He's like, I don't want to do this anymore.
yeah.
You know, um, And then he's had to, I mean, I've tried to use them myself and they're really hard to use and tiring. And so he's had to really learn how to, stay focused, keep his eyes focused, activate the cell successfully. There are little prompts and things that are built in visual cues for the user and everything. Um, but any family has the balance of you can set the activation speed for the cell at like a very minimal amount, but then as someone's scanning it with their eyes, they can set off all kinds of words and phrases that they don't intend to.
Hmm.
So it's called dwell time. So you have to work carefully with your AT specialist and with the individual using it to set a dwell time that will it's not too fatiguing for the user, but that will also prevent them from just accidentally activating something they don't mean to say. So there's a lot that goes into it.
What was the first thing he ever said with it?
Well, I would say the first thing that he independently said with it, something that we hadn't programmed in, because you program in things we think he might want to say, could say, all kinds of things. But when he discovered the keyboard function at one point, the
Yeah.
first independent thing he said was to put the letters F and U together. And he thought that was very funny.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, he was a teenager by then, so
Yeah, that makes sense.
right. It wasn't like watching my 6-year-old or something
Yeah.
do that. He was at least like 16, 17, 18 years old. I can't remember exactly, but
Yeah.
but yeah, he was very proud of that.
Yeah. Um, let's see. How has it changed his independence?
Well, it has allowed him to, the one that we have right now is kind of heavy, but it had the right kind of camera 5 years ago, 3 years ago. It allows us to go out into the community. It allows us to set up boards so that he can, um, greet people and ask them how they are. So the problem with someone who's non-speaking is that there's often, even if you're using a device to compose your own sentences, there's a gap, and we're used to coming up to someone and saying, "Hey, how you doing?" and getting an immediate response. And so people who depend on putting together their own sentences get really frustrated because it can take them several minutes. And in the meantime, whoever they're talking to has kind of like, their thoughts have kind of wandered off somewhere else. It's difficult to maintain a conversation. But I think the biggest impact it's had in Rob's life is that we can work with him carefully to compose his own advocacy speeches and his some of his own thoughts for other types of presentations and programs that he's asked to deliver. And we can program those in on multiple pages or on a single page, and he can activate those with a single glance. And then he can show people, "Hey, I'm here, I got things to say," and he can get his message across appropriately and quickly and efficiently. And he's I've always said of him since he was in middle school that, you know, Rob's got the kind of personality where if his disabilities didn't prevent him from really acting on this, he would have dropped out of high school at 16 and run off to Hollywood. He's
Yeah,
just kind of ham,
it
so
sounds like it.
it's very gratifying for him to be able to, with support from us, put together something he wants to say about Medicaid services, disability rights, rare disease, get it programmed in, and just deliver it, right? And and get applause, right?
Yeah,
And get people saying, "Yay, go Rob!" You know,
yeah,
I mean, we all like affirmation, right? You know,
yeah. So can you use it more for more things besides communication? Can you like school games or
yeah.
internet?
Actually, he can play some games, and we do have some learning software that we're trying to encourage him to use because he'll when he's trying to get his own points across, he'll go through multiple screens and just put together like multiple phrases and icons and then kind of put them all together and say them. And then we kind of have to read between the lines and try to figure out what he's trying to put together. Um, but there are other games that he can use, games that like are kind of like target practice, where he can do puzzles and reveal pieces. There are applications where he can compose music by looking at different chords and
Oh,
keys. And then the biggest thing for him is that as an artist, there is a website, and I think it's actually just called Jackson Pollock or something like that. I can't remember if it's jacksonpollock.com or something. And because my husband helps him with this, and with a little bit of assistance to help him, make straight lines or blobs or whatever, and a little bit of help with changing colors, he can actually draw with his eyes and paint and put together compositions. put together
Wow.
his own art. And he really loves doing that.
Hmm. Yeah, that would be great. So does he write his own music?
Yes, actually he does. My brother is a musician, his uncle.
Hmm.
And my brother Peter has been working with Rob now for years. Peter's a trained musician. He's an opera singer. He's got
Wow.
arts administration skills. He has a degree in music education. And so he's developed a color coordinated chords chart so that Robert can select colors to choose chords, and then they can put them together um, they work together to turn the choice of the chords into an actual melody.
Hmm.
And then those are set to words. Either sometimes Robert has composed his own poems. Sometimes they're kind of like, abstract kind of poems, or there are certain phrases that Robert have been said to Robert that Robert wants to turn into music. Like there's a whole song about my mom talks too much.
Oh,
That one.
yeah.
It's a classic. And others. And Robert has actually had pieces performed by a small opera company in Bethesda where
Wow.
we live, in stage productions. So,
You said advocacy was his idea. How
oh
did
yeah.
that how did he communicate that with you?
Well, when you have disabilities as complex as Rob's,
Hmm.
you qualify typically for your state's developmental disabilities Medicaid waiver, which provides habilitative supports. And in our state in Maryland, when you graduate from high school, the governor has traditionally waived the waiting list so that all graduating um, disabled people who qualify for the waiver go immediately into the waiver without a waiting list. So,
Hmm.
so when you do that, one of the things that you have to do is you have to pick a provider or pick self-direction, decide how the big pieces there. But you also have to go through an exercise where the person identifies like three life goals, three things that they want to do.
Hmm.
So we were all sitting around, a high school desk at one point as we were working through the process and all the required paperwork. And we were trying to figure out what three things Robert wanted to do with his life. And so, we were asking him a lot of questions, and we pretty quickly settled on, he wanted to be an artist. He always been liked art. He wanted to be involved in the theater and, you know, um, music. And then there was something he was clearly trying to tell us. And my husband picked up on it first because Robert had seemed to show a lot of interest in the things that I was interested in as an artist and a writer. And my husband was kind of like, well, what about me? What about dad? Don't you want to be like dad too? And Robert got all excited. And we started asking him questions about what he might want to do in politics. And one of the things that my husband said was, do you want to run for office? And I had to say, well, let's just start with some smaller goals, please. And what we finally figured out was that Robert wanted to be a protester
Hmm.
because Robert had gone to a small protest in Bethesda about the Charlottesville um, incidents in, I think it was 2016, 2017, where some protesters were killed. And he very much enjoyed holding up signs and being with a group of people protesting things. And he'd also had the experience of doing some advocacy work with Genomics. And so I kind of turned to him and I said, okay, so you want to be a protester? And I said, well, people protest things, but typically when people protest things, it's because they advocate for certain things. So what do you want to advocate for? And then we, asked him a bunch of questions and we came up with a list: rare disease, healthcare, disability rights.
Hmm.
And then it was my job to try to find some organizations that Robert, could be a good fit for.
Hmm. So right next to you is the Every Life Foundation. Have you been to their events?
We've been to some of their events. We got involved with them pretty early on, and then I had a friend reach out to me on Facebook and ask me if I wanted to get more involved with the Rare Action Network, which is the volunteer arm of the National Organization for Rare Disorders.
Hmm.
And so I was interested in exploring that opportunity for both Rob and myself. And while I deeply appreciate Every Life and deeply appreciate all the groups that are involved in rare disease, including Global Genes and others,
Hmm.
because Rob had such a rare disease and we were looking more for treatments rather than cures, at that point, going back that many years, many of those organizations were more focused on finding cures. And NORD itself was more focused on the idea of course, find cures when they're available, but also, develop supports for families. Um, and let's look at supporting people and families and treatments. I'm not saying those other groups don't do that. I mean, don't get me wrong. But at that juncture, for us, NORD was a better fit.
Hmm.
Although we're still more than happy to go out and help other rare disease groups, without question.
Hmm.
But we've found an advocacy home for rare disease at NORD.
Yeah. It's the Every Life Foundation. They have something for Rare Disease Week where they go out and talk to House and Senate
Yep,
every year, and
yep.
it is the biggest gathering of rare disease patients I've
Oh, I
ever
know.
seen.
Yeah, it's huge. We did that one year. And I think there are still some group photos on Every Life Foundation's website that have Rob in them, one of those
Hmm.
giant group photos in front of the Capitol kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. We also got involved, heavily involved with Little Lobbyists, which is a family-led organization that advocates for children with complex medical needs and disabilities. And that was another lane that we were really attracted to, um, because they were doing a lot of advocacy with Medicaid programs. And I think now many of the rare disease organizations are realizing that they really needed to help a lot of their families get more access to Medicaid services for a variety of reasons. But like I said, at the beginning of this journey, um, rare disease groups had, their own priorities. And because Rob doesn't really have a rare disease cohort, it was kind of lonely for us. It's
Yeah.
like he's the only one in the US.
Yeah.
So
So
so we just found some different homes for our advocacy.
yeah.
And then
There's a new one too that's popped up on my Facebook page every once in a while. Salmon Searchlight, and I don't know if you've heard of them, but they are also popping up. They work a lot more with seizures than anything else, but
oh
it's
yes, people with seizures have such difficulty fitting into the Medicaid ecosystem. That's Robert doesn't have seizures, but I have a lot of friends whose children do have seizures. And I
mhm,
see the kind of struggles they have getting services, getting habilitative supports, navigating nursing supports. And that's a group that I hold dear to my heart and want to speak up for whenever possible, whenever I have an opportunity to do so.
mhm. Do you going back to things? Do you receive nursing support?
We do receive home nursing supports. We are authorized to receive 123 what are called global hours of nursing supports per week. They're use them or lose them. They don't roll over. Global means that we can decide what shifts work for us and identify shifts and times that we want the nursing services, as opposed to the Division of Nursing Services saying, okay, you get overnight supports, you get someone who can clock in at 10 and leave at 7, or you have daytime supports authorized from 7 in the morning to like 5 in the afternoon. So we just have more flexibility, and a lot of people can request those
Hmm.
without too much hassle.
Yeah, a lot of that sounds a lot like what I what I was doing with the Oregon Home Care Commission, but they uh, through DHS, but it's Medicaid run.
Yeah, and the big problem right now is that there's a tremendous home nursing shortage.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's hard to get nurses to come in, and take shifts. And yeah, yeah, that's a whole other conversation. And
yeah,
unfortunately, right now, Medicaid, especially in Maryland, I don't know how other states work, it's kind of like an all or nothing thing. It's like, okay, you need one-to-one private duty nursing support like 24/7, or you just need someone to help you, like, dole out pills and take them.
yeah,
you know, and maybe a handful of other minor medical needs. And most people are kind of in between.
yeah. I did that for like 11, 12 years, and really, I only had one person that I ever worked for that was 24/7 care.
Mhm.
But there, when I first started, I could do it anytime, and it got so I couldn't do it at any time I wanted to anymore. It's
Yeah.
um, the especially with the clinical trial that I just joined on about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. I'm trying to work in Maryland right now to bring home the point that, while Robert has substantial need for during the day and especially overnight for one-to-one supervision, I mean, he really could have a blend of one-to-one private duty nursing and some delegation support. And my goodness, that would be cheaper for the state, right?
Yeah,
But states are kind of stuck in this mode of, if you need any kind of nursing support at all, it must be that you're on death's doorstep. So they're kind of like not with the program of people with all kinds of intensive medical needs are actually thriving in their communities. And they've got portable medical equipment, and life isn't slowing them down.
Geneva, thank you so much for sharing your family story. Uh, Conversations and like these help educate healthcare professionals, policymakers, and families who may be walking a similar path. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Rare Connection on YouTube and uh, or listen wherever you get your podcasts. Every share helps us connect more people living with rare diseases, raise awareness, and support research towards better treatments. My next episode will be with Melissa White-Boyer, who is the mother of Parker, who has Weiterman-Steiner syndrome. Um, you all, she also has, she is also an author of a children's book called I Am Rare, available on Amazon. The episode will be live on my YouTube channel, formerly Rare Chef, now called Rare Connection. And until next time, you can until next time you're never alone, because with over 10,000 rare conditions affecting 1 in 10 people, rare is everywhere.